Luke Sutton, thank you so much for joining me. It's early morning where you are. It's afternoon, sort of late afternoon for me. But I really do appreciate you coming on. How you doing?
Really good. No, thank you for having me. It's a bit early, but I'm an early riser and I've got my cup of coffee, so I'm all good. Looking forward to chatting.
So we're going to go into what you do now as a sports agent. But for those that perhaps don't know much about you, can we go into just your journey into becoming a cricketer, professional cricketer, where it all started for you? And I'll just kind of let you start wherever you want to start that story, and we'll go from there, really.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll try and keep it. I won't babble on too long. But as from a young kid, I was quite talented at sport, and sort of naturally quite talented, but also highly competitive. I was a bit of a pain for my mum and dad at times. I was very, very competitive. And initially, I was a swimmer. We lived overseas for most of my sort of up to about the age of 10. I lived in foreign countries or outside of England. And then I was a swimmer, and then I went to a big sport school that was, famous for sport, Millfield School. And at Millfield, I found cricket, and I just loved it. I loved the kind of I loved the tradition of cricket. I think it's because I'd not lived in England for so much of my life that then cricket was like so quintessentially English that I really liked the kind of the kit and the tees and all those sort of things. I found it really interesting. But I loved the kind of Moorish nature of cricket as well. It was like, I could get 30 runs. Then I was like, I could get 40, and then I could get 60, or I could get one catch, I could get two catches. And it was kind of, I was just really intrigued by the game. And anyway, to cut a long story short, when I left Millfield, I pretty much went straight into professional cricket with Somerset then, and I did 4 seasons at Somerset. Then I moved to Derbyshire, where I did 6 or 7. Then I went to Lancashire and I did another 6 or 7, and then I came back for Derbyshire for 1. So I was very fortunate to have a long career, I guess. I don't think I was the most talented player, but I was, I kind of scrapped my way the whole way through my career, and then it ended up being, a pretty long one. So I'm really grateful for that.
Where was your first sort of like taste of success? Did you play any other ball sports around that? You were saying swimming, but did you play any ball sports? Because cricket is not you have to have that technical ability essentially at some point. And if you're in the pool, there's a very difference between having a ball sport and being a swimmer. So where did that start? And then when was your first sort of taste of success of it?
Yeah, so I think you're right, and up till the point when I went to Milford, I hadn't really played any team sports at all. I played football a little bit because we lived in Peru in South America, and I remember playing football a little bit. But then when I went to Milford, I didn't just play cricket. I was playing rugby. I was playing hockey. But what I did naturally, and totally, well, maybe it wasn't by accident, but I seemed to sort of fall into it. I was always the goalkeeper or the wicket keeper. And for instance, when the master in charge said, "Look, we're going to, form our under-10s cricket team. Who wants to be the wicket keeper?" I didn't know what the wicket keeper was, but he said, "Look, that one person needs to be the wicket keeper. We need one in the team." And no one was putting their hand up, so I was just kind of like, "Okay, I'll do it." And next thing I know, I was a wicketkeeper for my job for about 20 years. But I definitely remember early on just sort of really enjoying catching. And I used to go in the back garden with my brother and really enjoy. My brother used to underarm the ball to me, and I loved catching. I loved diving and catching, and I kind of must have had a natural affinity to that side of ball sports for sure. And then it just became, in the end, that it was kind of comparison between going out and playing a team sport during the day, or swimming at 5:30 in the morning and at lunchtime, and then after school. I love swimming, and I still love swimming now, but it was full on.
Yeah. It makes sense why you got that early riser mentality now, and probably isn't tuned into your depth for sure.
Yes.
Do you think having a sibling, I had a younger brother who I played cricket with all the time in the garden. That was really, I always say, like, I'd have never turned professional if I didn't have my younger brother, because it is that competition you have, that that drive against them, or whether it's actually almost the 10,000 hours of repetition that you're putting in. Did you have that competition between your brother?
A little. I mean, my brother and I did compete a lot, but he was almost like, and I know with wicket keeping, he was just sort of like an amazing assistant. Like he was just, he'd always underarm me the ball for hours, would go out there and hours. And my brother is 5 years older than me, so it was always quite an annoying age gap for him, particularly. Like, when I was 8, he was 13, going through puberty. The last thing he wanted me was like an 8-year-old kicking around. Then I was 13, he was 18. It was always like this quite uncomfortable gap for him. For me, it was brilliant, but for him, not so much. But we used to play in the garden loads, for sure.
Yeah. So were there any big memories that you had that you that really stick in your mind as to sort of where the passion for playing the game? Because I've always spoken to many professional cricketers, but also professional athletes. And speaking of that moment when you go from this being a hobby and then also it becoming a job, what was the passion for you to keep you doing that job, continuously doing it for such a long period that allowed you to have such a long career? What was it that stayed alive and then throughout that whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's definitely that moment as a pro, I think, when it moves away from you just messing around to it being like, I've got to pay the mortgage now type thing. And it's it actually is quite a sort of suffocating moment for many people, because it's just a totally different thing. I don't know. I felt like for my whole career, and this might sound a bit weird, I was just like battling to survive. I felt like I was, I've got a reasonable record and all that kind of thing, but I felt like I was just good enough to hang on at the top level. I was just good enough all the time. So I needed to do absolutely everything. It might have been in my own head, and I accept that might be part of the reason why I ran into some of the sort of mental health difficulties I did. But it was like the intensity was at 1,000 non-stop, and if I felt like if that intensity ever dropped, then I wouldn't be good enough. So it was like this constant survival. I mean, and then the brief moments where I'd get 100 or I'd keep really well that day, they would kind of come and then go. It was quite fleeting. It was a weird. I don't know if it was weird. I know a lot of players kind of have thought like this, but I know a lot of players who don't as well, who kind of just embrace what the day is going to bring and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't like that for me. And actually, when I finished playing, there was almost an element of relief, which sounds really awful when I've been privileged to play for so long, but it was like I'd exhausted myself, and I was just in this constant kind of battle to survive. That's how I saw it. It didn't matter really. And this was when I turned pro. At school, I was just trying to play for England and, score runs. And I loved, I remember the first time I hit a 6 and I was like, wow, I can hit a 6. And I was like, all these moments were like really precious. When I turned as a pro at Somerset, I just remember thinking, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? It was like at Somerset then was Andrew Caddick, Neil Mallender, there was like some very senior players. And I was like, I've got to survive here. But funnily enough, that kind of stayed with me until I was, 35 and stopped playing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You talked about being exhausted, because your role as a wicketkeeper is really exhausting. Like you are doing however many squats throughout the day, just moving around. You're literally the engine of the entire team's energy. So how much because I want to talk about what that mental side, that toll you had there, but also what was it? Were you keeping yourself fit throughout your career? Like there's obviously a big push on physicality in the game now, and it's constantly progressing. But was that something that you prioritized to have that long career, or just to do your job well?
Oh, all of it. I mean, fitness for me was massive. It was a huge, in fact, looking back on my career, I think I spent too much time on fitness than maybe practicing my game. I would, that sounds like I didn't practice on my game, but I definitely, fitness was everything for me. And as much as anything, it was to keep me in the physical shape to be able to output what I needed in games. And often I'd bat in the top 6. So, you know, that there was I could be in the field for a day and a half and a couple of early wickets, and I was putting my pads on. So you needed to be fit for sure. But I think the fitness side of it was, it gave me, I don't know, mentally I felt like it was like sacrifice, it was discipline, it was intention. It was like, you know, it's what I was prepared to put into what I was doing. And so there was a physical side of preparing for a match, and there was also, it was partly a mental side of preparing as well, of going through that to say, look, I'm ready mentally, I'm ready because I've put this in.
Yeah, I reckon I kind of sit in that bracket as well, where I think maybe I pushed a little bit too hard with some of the physical stuff, but then I also kind of counter argue that, where I think, well, do you know what, if I didn't do that, then that was the one thing that made me feel mentally strong and mentally resilient, was the fact that I kind of would sit there and go, well, I've earned this. I feel like I've earned this right to be here because I've put in the work. I can physically notch up the miles that I've put in. And then, yeah, that's a tough balance when you do turn pros, that balance between the physical, the technical, the skill, the rest, the recovery. And even in a previous podcast with Olympic swimmer Caitlin Sandino, we were talking about, like, when you're younger, you feel invincible. You feel like you can just, your body can take a lot more. But then as you get older, you probably need to have that more rest and recovery. But I don't know. I always tussle with it because I think it's so important for the mental side as well, to get yourself ready, to be ready for the match. And just, even if you're the everyday person, just exercise is great for your mental health anyway. So you know that moving your body physically is just going to be better for you anyway. So yeah, it's a tough side. What was it? The prep? Was there any prep that you would do mentally to prep? Anything specifically that you would do to prep yourself before games or training or anything around there?
I mean, training was really important for me, because I felt like I needed to have that intensity in training to be ready. So I trained hard, you know. I was, you know, looking back, I was critical of other people who didn't train hard, and I recognize now it was partly because I wasn't able to recognize that people might be different to me. I know it sounds, and everyone has their own way, and I kind of, I look back on it now and I can see that. But for me, like, if I don't bring that intensity to training, then I don't bring it to the game. So I've got to be on it, you know, really, really on it. When I bat in the nets, you know, if I get out, that's like I've got out in the match. And, you know, I'd have that kind of level of intensity. If I do my wicket keeping drills, if I didn't finish with it absolutely spot on, I would keep going until it was absolutely spot on. And I think in that I was just mentally rehearsing myself, you know, all the time for what was, you know, I was prepared to do, what I was about to go and do. It was just, you know, full power intensity on the whole time. That's the best way I can describe it. It was just like, you know, there wasn't any kind of, you know, okay, take it easy today type thing. It wasn't part of my mindset.
And that intensity is what kind of makes you feel prepared anyway when you're out in the middle, because it's more the intent. There's an intensity out in the middle anyway. Once you're in competition,
yeah,
it goes up a notch. So James Taylor said it brilliantly. He talks about train hard, play easy. I mean, it's such a cliche, but it really is true. You want to train that at that intensity or more, so that the games are not a shock. They're really, really not a shock.
No, that's. I would just add to that. I absolutely agree. I think as a wicketkeeper, also the thing you've always got to bear in mind, and now, I was a wicketkeeper all my career, so with no experience of being a bowler, for instance. But if you're a wicketkeeper in the first half an hour of a day's play, a ball wobbles and it catches you on the wrong angle on the finger, and you might break a finger, or you might, you know, get a nasty blow. You're there for another 5 hours, and and the game. Dave Houghton, my ex-coach Derbyshire, used to say this to me, and I still use it actually as a motto in my own sort of life now. So the game's not going to slow down for you. And that's right. So if you're a wicketkeeper, if you've not put yourself through hell on a particular training session, hell will arrive during a match where it's wobbling all over the place. You've got a broken finger, and no one cares. They're like, you know, you've got to get on with it for another 5.5 hours. So if mentally you're not able to do that and go, I've got to dig in here and get through this, and you want everything to be pristine and perfect, then it's going to be I don't think you survive.
That's such a good point. I think of all the keepers that, I mean, I played with, and their fingers are just shot to pieces, and the players that you see, like what they go through, the stitches they're putting on, and you were right that not only you might get that on the first day, you got 4 days to go, so you got 4 days to contest with, and do that with a broken finger, you can't come off. And even from bowling, I think the amount of times I was bowling with massive bleeding blisters on my feet, or like toenails that were ripped off and blood off my socks, and you sit there and now coaching people, and I see maybe some of the excuses they come up with or the reasons why they stop, and to understand that you are not going to play every game at 100%, you are not going to train at 100% all the time, is the reality. If you want to move from recreational to professional, or if you want to be even in a recreational game and you want to be really good at it, there has to be an element of you're just never going to be 100%, and whatever it is, find a way to get around it. And there's like you said, the game is not going to stop for you. I've been seeing a little bit of training with some guys that have been working on their composure and working on their mental skills around the game, and we throw scenarios at them where we throw them off and change the scenario just to see how they react to the situation, because I believe that you cannot change the scenario you're in, you can only change how you adapt to it. It's like in a game, you can't change what someone else does, only you can change to how you react to that situation and what you do in that situation. So understanding that you need to have there's no amount of bargaining you can do, basically. There's no amount of bargaining you can do to change the situation. You have to change the situation, how you deal with it. And I think that's something that is really important for people to understand when they're moving through sport at whatever level. And in life, you're right. It's a great life motto as well. The game won't change.
It is. Or life won't slow down. It's like you can throw your excuse out to the universe, the atmosphere, and the universe carries on going. Doesn't go, oh, poor Luke, let's just slow down for a little bit. I was teammates with Mal Lloyd for a long time, and Mal and I actually clashed quite a lot. We were very different characters, but he actually used to have a way of saying it, which I also really connected with. I won't swear just in case, but he would, I'll use a polite word instead, but he would say, the thing is, what you've got to remember is just no one really cares. And when I first heard him say it, I was like, what does he mean? And he was basically like, you've got to remember that in our, if you get on your pity pot about something, the situation changed, or he didn't do this, or, coach got it wrong, or it's like, no one really cares. In the end, you just got to do your job. You've got to get out there, and and 2 days later, 3 days later, when the game's over, people aren't going, yeah, but there was, he got one in the first half an hour on his finger. They don't care. It's like, and that's the brutal nature of. And if you want to survive at the pro level, then you've got to come to terms with that very, very quickly.
Yeah, you can take that into life as well. I think even with things like people putting themselves out there on social media and what they do, like it's kind of something I live by. Like people things move so fast that no one cares. Like, so just crack on and do what you want to do, and do it the way you want to do it. So look, I want to talk about towards the end of your career, and then we'll go into mental health. Was there a moment you started to become aware of your mental health, and when it started to become something that you were conscious about, or was there something that really, a moment that caught you by surprise?
So my journey with it was, I always describe it as kind of being like an ever decreasing circle, which, at the start was really wide, and I didn't even know it was there. So I was kind of slowly going down, but I didn't know I was going down. I didn't even know it was what was happening, and it was only right at the end. It was like the circle sped up as I got towards the bottom, and all of a sudden, within the last 2-3 weeks, I was like, I'm in real trouble here. And I remember I sort of talk about it in my book. This phrase in my head was like, where did it start and finish for me to get here? What happened? So that's just my unique journey. For a lot of it, was very gradual. And, like that mindset of me going, I need to survive. I need, everything we've talked about, it's like foot down. I've got to go for this. No one's going to give me a break here. I've just got to, survive and hang in there. And that mentality and that ferocity kind of had play out in other ways away from the field. Drinking would it was like a hat to blow out steam in a huge way, not a healthy way. I know people do that in life generally, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, there was like that intensity that I had on the field then was off the field as well, because it was like, couldn't survive without it. And so this, everything was sort of gradually getting worse in a way. It was like that my great strength started to become a bit of a weakness for me, but I still didn't in my head start to recognize things like anxiety or depression, or I don't know why. I don't know whether because I didn't let myself consider it that, or I just was just a bit trapped really in my own sort of head and way of going about things. And then I guess that when I went back to Derbyshire for my final year of professional cricket, I was having trouble in my marriage, and I was basically down in Derbyshire at the time on my own, and everything I'm talking about just really intensified. Sort of, and there was moments where then in that final season where I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be hungover and I'd make myself sick. And then I'd just be crippled with anxiety. Like I just wanted to sit in the corner of the room and not get out. And I was captain. And I'd be like, I have got to get myself up and about here. I've got to get going. And I remember that those times kind of thinking, where's this, I'm in trouble here. Where's this heading? But I still didn't know. I didn't put a label on it. I didn't put, mental health or whatever, or anything like that. I was just like, I'm in trouble here. But that kind of survival mechanism was like, I've got to survive. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't do anything about it. And I was just sort of dying really, just hanging in there, and kept looking in the mirror thinking, where's this all going to head? Where's this all going? And it was, it's hard, I'm talking about myself, and I'm kind of heartbroken in a way that I felt that loneliness, and I just, what I was experiencing was depression, was high levels of anxiety, very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I was just unraveling. I was just breaking down, and then by the time when I got to the end of that season, funnily enough, I just completely fell apart. And that's when I went into the Priory.
So was there, before we go on to that, was there anything that like anyone in the team you felt you could talk to? I also feel like there's probably a little bit around there where there's probably not much awareness of it. Really, not much awareness, not much definite education for everyday people on it, and that brings the awareness of it, so the conversations don't flow as much. Did you feel like that? Did you feel like there was literally no one around that you felt?
And it's not a criticism of anyone. No. I had some brilliant teammates, but no, I didn't feel like there was anyone I could talk to. And I've been through an era. Marcus Roscovic was a player that I grew up with, who came from the same cricket club, and I know him really well. And I remember reading his book and being really moved by it. And Jonathan Trott had gone through what he had with the Ashes very publicly. So it wasn't like, I just felt like, and I feel very passionately about this now. And it's funny you were talking about it before we started recording it. I think we were good at talking about it, and we're still guilty of this, and kind of top line, like campaigns and hashtags, and like, it's good to talk. Absolutely it is. But I don't think there was anything that sort of, I didn't know. I had been building up to this for 17 years, maybe my whole life. I'd been building up to this without knowing it, that I was at some point gonna sort of blow out. I couldn't, it wasn't manageable, the way I lived my life. And it was successful, but I was dying, I was rotting, and at no point did anywhere in that line did someone go, and it's not a criticism, because it's not easy, and these things are not easy, but there was at no point, no one went, are you all right? You're okay? Do you have moments? Because I think I would have gone, once in a while I've gone, yeah, I find this hard, like I feel like I'm chained to myself in a way, and I want to, and I used to kind of, when people I was drinking a lot, people say, why are you drinking so much? I was just like, well, I just want a bit of escape. And they'd go, what are you trying to escape from? And I'd say, I'm trying to escape from me. I just want to break from me in my head.
Mm.
And that, I guess, what I was vocalizing it, but there was nowhere to go with it.
Yeah. Do you think sort of like changing room culture at that time, and I guess even still now, I think male changing room culture can sometimes play a part. Do you feel it did for you?
Yes, definitely. Again, it's not and I do think it still exists today. I think
Yeah, 100%.
and I talk as loudly and as passionately about this as I can, because I think top flight sports still has some major issues to address, and we're very fast to want to tell everyone we're doing a great job with it, and I think there are people doing some wonderful work, but I think we have a long way to go. The rise of mental health and addiction issues within top flight sport across the world are exponentially rising. It's not slowing down. And there's lots of factors that come into that. But at some point, we have to recognize that something's not working. And I think for me, the culture of cricket, probably much like when you stepped into it, there is an ego, a testosterone-driven mentality to survive, and it's not just survive with the opposition; it's to survive within your own squad, with your own, that own dynamic where, people are kind of clashing and and in different kind of ways, and showing weakness or vulnerability in that way it was just not. I wouldn't do it. There was no way I was prepared to do that. And I worried for guys today where, I go into dressing rooms after play, and sometimes, I just see all the players looking at their phones, and I worry about that. I just think, if there's someone in that dressing room who's starting to act out in a way that I used to act out, they're trying to search for their answer in Instagram. And, it's not a good mix, that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma. It highlights that on a societal level. I do think that I do feel that sport exacerbates it massively, because there's an inner sanctum, and I think cricket, rugby, football, your team sports, where you're not an individual, you are around a team. It's so interesting that the amount of people that I've interacted with and I've spoken to that may come to me with the stuff that I'm teaching now and ask for tools and strategies and how to look after whether it's their body or their mind, they'll come and ask me that in private. But then you go into a changing room and someone will say something or they'll act differently, and it is purely ego driven. I'm not willing to sit here and drop my ego for the group and kind of stand up for what I really deep down believe is right. It's like the whole room is battling this inner battle, but collectively no one wants to admit it. And that for me is the thing that I actually believe would make great teams. I actually believe it would make the teams far better. It would make them communicate better. It would make them understand each other better, and I think performance would change. I truly do, because there's no kidding yourself. It's almost like you're not hiding from anything. So I don't know what you feel could be done more right now with like what you're saying. You're seeing these guys going along. Is there anything you feel that should be done above this higher level banner of just talking about it? Because I know that I feel there should be strategies and tools given to them the same way they look after their bodies in the gym. There should be ways of being able to manage this stuff in your own time and know how to do it, especially from a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you say, and I think the biggest. Sorry, I'll sort of jump back to that in a minute. I think that the starting place for me with everything, I'll just talk about cricket, but it applies to other team sports. Is right at the top with the England team, because you will have seen it in your time. The England players are away playing for England. When they come back and play for their counties, everyone just wants to do what they do, and they are a huge influence. So if they go out heavy drinking, everyone goes out heavy drinking. If they do something, they start betting on horses, everyone starts betting on the horses. They're the idols of the game, and so you need to start right at the top and then let it filter down. I think it's not a mistake, sorry, but where they say, well, let's educate at the academy level and then there'll be the next generation and come through. And I get that, but I think that by the time they get through might be 10 years, and what happened in those 10 years culturally might be very deep, so that when that academy player steps into the system, he or she's up against a cultural thing that is, it throws out everything that they've learned prior. So I think you need to start at the top. I think the biggest thing I would always want is for teams, people who are running professional teams, to not just judge players on how they're doing on the field. And I know it sounds really obvious, but that is what happens. I could list examples where guys, and I was one of them, who was playing all right on the field, but off the field I was falling apart. But because I was playing all right, it was a kind of like, well, there's nothing, it's okay, and that cultural thing of, like, well, he's in the bookies, or he's just gambling a lot on his phone, but he's playing brilliantly. Maybe he needs that escape. He enjoys it. He loves the GGs. Then we all have a laugh about it. Give us a few tips. That stuff goes on, and no one in the team. I'm not talking about the PCA or union. I'm talking about the team, coach, director of cricket goes, is this kid all right? Because maybe we just need to sit down and say, you're right. Or, even, and it's not often talked about, but, a guy who's sleeping with every woman he can meet, rather than it being celebrated and kind of held up as, hey, what a lad type thing, someone go, actually, is he all right? Because really, he might actually just be developing a really dysfunctional relationship with women, and that is, and he gets lost in it. And I think the emphasis isn't just always about what's going on the field. And of course, we play to win, no question. And that's the most important thing. But I just feel like culturally, there needs to be, at the team level, there needs to be more of a conscious approach to saying, where are each of our guys at with their lives? And if there is any, and there has to be an educational piece for those coaches and directors of cricket and assistant coaches. And then say, okay, if there's something that we're not sure about, then we need the right people who understand this kind of thing, maybe to have a space with them in which they can kind of talk and see where they're at.
It's really interesting you say about that with the England team being the pinnacle there. It's so true. You actually, counties, the lower levels, even they are professionals, but they're looking at the England guys. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And you kind of, and this actually stems to the supporters, to the fans, to the amateurs that are playing. If they see someone that is just doing it, looks like they're doing it cool and real easy, or they're going out and partying, then all right, well, that means that I can still play for England if I'm doing that sort of thing. Whereas actually the flip side of it would be like, well, let's have a look at that England player, like you're saying, and just check he's okay. Just check he's okay, because you're so right. You do see it as, he's performing unreal on the field, but do we know how this is going to pan out when his career ends? There's how much of that, and how much of, I mean, did you, like you said, you went into the Priory after, but had you, towards the end of your career, had you had any eye on what was going to happen after that? And do you also take that into account with your clients now that you work with?
Well, I most definitely do with my clients now. I think my job isn't just about helping them make money and maximize their careers. It's about helping them have a kind of happy and sustainable life. That it's a calling as much as anything else. I don't want people to go to the place that I went to in many ways. I mean, I did have an eye on what I want. I'd set up my business whilst I was playing, so I definitely had an eye on what would happen in retirement. But it was in the same kind of mentality. It was kind of foot down, 1,000,000% intensity, build this business as fast as I could, and I was just chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing, and so it wasn't that for me. It was just that, I guess it was that I had no. I'm saying these sorts of things in retrospect. I just didn't have any real sense of peace. I didn't have any real sense of, my moments of enjoying something were very fleeting, and I look back on that and I kind of go, that's a shame. I watch guys celebrate now, and like there's been a test series win or someone gets 100, and I watch it and I'm almost intrigued by it, because, I can see them almost soaking it in at times. I'm fascinated by it, because I'm like, for me that was then there, and then I was like, I was off, and it was, and actually I don't live my life like that now. I really try and savor every moment, whether it's this conversation with you or whatever, because I don't want to live my life like that. But I think I do try and instill that in my clients, remember, give them a sense of perspective about enjoying the moment and being in the now.
Yeah, that is really true. I think probably I looked at when England won the World Cup with that sort of lens on as well. I sort of really, it was kind of a long time since I'd seen England, well, a while since I'd seen England win a trophy like that, and you watching the guys doing the lap, and it was such a beautiful day as well, and walking around Lords, and guys really looked like they were playing as a team and they were savouring it. But yeah, I know you're only going to know on an individual level. You can see that as a fan looking through the lens, but you can't know. You're never going to know how that individual feels. So when you finished, and we'd spoken about that you were okay to talk about this, but you finished your career, you went through the problems that you went through, and then eventually booked into the Priory. What was that experience like? What did you learn from that experience?
Oh golly, I mean, I don't think it's too much to say. I think it saved my life, really, and the people that helped me get in there, I'm forever indebted to, because I just was I was completely falling apart. I had to give people a perspective. I kind of try and give people as graphic a view of it in my book, but I basically couldn't stop drinking. I kind of was, I drank for sort of 10, 11 days straight, as much as I could whilst I was awake. And I was in a really, really bad way. And I just felt like I'd been hanging on by my fingertips, and then I'd gone. It was, I couldn't hold on any longer. And so the first thing for me when I went into the Priory was this sort of feeling of like, I remember saying in my head, the game is up. And what I was saying to myself was, I can stop pretending. I can stop pretending everything's all right, because everything is not all right. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I was just, everything is not all right. And I kind of, that was the moment where I was like, I can let go, and I'm in the Priory Hospital, and this is pretty bad, and so there was a sense of relief. There was definitely a sense of confusion, of like, where did this start and finish for me to get here? This wasn't part of my plan. I am successful. I am strong. I'm a leader. This shouldn't be happening to me. This is, and thinking I was in the wrong place. There was, in my group, there was drug dealers, there was a priest, there was a lawyer, there was a prostitute, there was, and I was there, this sort of silver spoon, kind of professional cricketer, thinking I was a bit better than everyone. And it was the most kind of grounding experience of my life, and I needed it, because I was really unwell, in lots of ways, and I'd really fallen off the map in a bad way mentally. And so I had all of these things floating around, and I was told that I should stay for 28 days, a month basically, and I said no, I'll just do a week, because I thought it was so important that A, I could do it in a week, and B, I needed to get back to the world to, I don't know, be important. And then I did a week, and then I said I'd do another week, and then when I got towards the end of the second week, the sort of penny started to drop, and I was like, I'm not very well here. And then that was it. I started to listen. I was listening before, but I was listening, and I was identifying a great deal with what was being talked about and how it was going. But it was like the penny dropped that I was the problem. I had this sort of long list of reasons why I was there, and all the pressure I was under, and my marriage, and all this sort of thing. And suddenly I realized that I was the problem, and the change needed to come from me.
Do you think that's something that potentially a lot of people, not on that extreme level, but outside of an institution like that, and outside of a team environment, do you reckon too many people probably have almost a blame culture on something else than it is? oh, I know it is. This is why this is happening, and push the responsibility away far too often away from themselves, rather than taking that moment and looking inside and saying, well, okay, the common factor here is really I'm the X in this equation. And do you have any advice for people to, through the experiences you had there, and how they potentially can look a bit more within, in that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, and I do. The answers always lie within, always. And I it's nearly 9 years since I went in the Priory, and I've not drunk a single drink since then, and my life is completely different to what it was then. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to kind of do daily work on myself, and kind of go, what is, and the answers lie within me, and that looking out to blame is often also when someone is looking out for happiness, and actually they go hand in hand. If you're often looking outside for your affirmation, then you're likely to look outside when you want to blame. And we're all guilty of it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not kind of some sort of perfect on a fluffy cloud thing. I get it wrong all the time, but I think I have a check now where I'm like, do you know what, this is about me, and often if I'm venting a frustration about something, it's actually something that's going on in me. And so, my advice to people is, if you're in that place where you feel like you're blaming a lot, you feel like, your luck's about to turn, that kind of thing, just over the corner or just round, things will change for me. I would say that, concentrate on the now and within, and do the work on within. Look at what's going on with yourself, and you might need help from somebody to do that, advice as to what does that look like, how
Yeah.
do I do that work. I think it's very difficult to do on your own, but the answers lie within, and suddenly you can get to a place where you can go out and play at whatever you want to play at, be a professional sportsman, be a great business person, do whatever you want. But your happiness and your stillness and your stability is kind of within you, and that's, you look after that. You're not looking for outside affirmation or blame.
Is there anything that you do daily that you feel keeps you in check?
Yeah, I don't do it every day now, but I did do for a long time. Was I write a gratitude list every day.
Yeah.
Of just, and it doesn't have to be long. Like I could be having a coffee and I just write 5 things down that to be grateful for. I also try, and at the end of the day, again, if just I've got 10 minutes just to kind of think back on the day, how the day went. Did I clash with anyone? Did I speak to anyone in a way that I wish I hadn't? Or, was I my best that day? And kind of just have a little look at it and just, roll it back and go, okay, what's going on? And then I guess permanently just always be in a place where I recognize I want to have healthy conversations, healthy, like this, like this. I'll get a lot out of this because I'm triggering that part of me that's healthy and allows me to progress. I'm just really conscious then, if I'm in unhealthy conversations or with unhealthy people, or toxic type of environments, I'll become toxic. So I'm just really careful to protect where I'm at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's so much there. I do something where, well, I think within the sportsman within us, we tend to go through that sort of like review process sometimes, where I think it can be a natural. I think it's a thing you should be doing if you want to be getting better at something. But once you've instilled it in you, like for example, I was doing a big session with a group of lads last night, and I'll finish, and we've got other coaches that are helping out, and I will ask them. I am not ashamed to sit there and go, how did we think that went? I actually even ask the group, ask these kids that I'm working with, as the person they're looking up to, how did we go, guys? How can we get better? And I'm instilling in them this review process of like, what did we do well? What did we do not so well? And what are we going to do next time to get better? Just literally those 3 questions, I think, work really, really well. And another one I found is quite powerful is almost either writing down or mentally noting or viewing yourself as a stranger and seeing yourself as through the lens of as a stranger, and then you see yourself for the actions you're actually doing. Now that could be transferred into anything. If you want to improve your diet, like if it's your diet you want to change, like write down what you're actually eating. It's just black and white, there it is. the interactions you were talking about there, once you have them, what were the emotions like that you felt from them? How did you feel? How did you feel it went? What was the reaction from the person you got? The tone of voice you used, and that self-awareness then just starts to spill out into other areas that you do. And used correctly, it is the most powerful tool for making yourself better and growing and learning in every situation, in my opinion.
No, 100%. Not just your opinion, my opinion as well. No, I mean, great self-awareness and work within that. And also, you know, genuinely, from someone who's sort of life's fallen apart to now, it also leads to the most fantastic way to live, you know, and you can still be successful. That was always used to terrify me. It was like, well, if I turn the intensity thing, you know, I find a different way, does this mean I can still survive and do well? And that's what used to terrify me. You know, I didn't want to listen to another way because it was like I had too much to risk. That's what it felt like. Whereas now, having been forced to look another way of how not to deal with life, I'm like, this is so much better, so much more powerful and sustainable, and I can be the best version I can be. And you know, I think if I was 20 years younger and I was playing professional cricket, I would be more honest about the areas that I needed to work on in my game and not hide from that and fear of opinion. I would be like, no, you know, and those moments would come and I could enjoy them much more. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for it.
Do you think it would have improved the people around you as well?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think then you would be part of a better culture, you know, and a kind of that culture we're talking around. I mean, if you know, you could be that person within that environment who is kind of not just talking it, but living it. People could, you know, you'd be an example of how to go about your life and your game. I think that would be very powerful.
Yeah. Again, I think it really does need those role models as well that you can go back to. And see if they're doing it, then it must be working, because if you can match the result up with it, it's again shows it works and very powerful. So do you feel there's enough out there right now in the world of, or is there anything you think that could be done better, whether it's through organizations or individuals, on allowing people in sport to think about this side of their game? Because everything is, like you said, results driven. It's done on the physical, it's done on the skill. But is there something you feel that should be implemented? Have you had a thought about it? Yeah, I know I've got some.
I have thought about it a lot, because often, you know, you can kind of get in this thing where you're, you know, offering up, well, this needs to change, this needs to change. Then, of course, you know, someone can say, well, what would you change? You know, and you've got to be able to offer something. For me, I think it's not, you know, players, and you know this, you know, the PCA is a great organization and they offer up lots of support mechanisms and channels for you to go through. But I think it has to go, it's got to be not a different approach. I think that's got to stay there, and that's great. But players don't always do that. They don't feel comfortable to do that. They are, you know, still stuck in that culture of, you know, I know I shouldn't show weakness. I shouldn't, you know, all these sorts of things. So I actually think the responsibility must come on the professional teams themselves much better. And I think it's about, you know, teams have, say the England team, you know, it has a sports psychologist, it has a team doctor, it has kind of all these sorts of absolutely right people to be around. I would love to see the England team have someone around them who is a kind of mentor type of person, who is just with the team, and is a totally safe person. They don't have anything to do with team selection, or, you know, everything with them is confidential, and they're with the team at certain periods of time. They have to be with the team all the time, and they're just checking in on a totally different level. It isn't about performance. It isn't about it's about life and where they're at, and just let that happen and let that grow. And you could even be two different people. It could even be three different people who alternate at different times, who understand what we're talking about and have really got an understanding of this. And they're not seen as a pain by the head coach, and they're seen as an integral part of what's happening. Everyone buys into the fact that this person is going to help people develop as people and perform better. They go hand in hand, and they're around the team, and they give an outlet to players in a safe space. You should check in with them to see where they're at. When the facade of the whole dressing room culture of can't show any weakness, it's like quietly alone, a different place. How are you doing? What's going on? And allow that to happen more.
Yeah.
And I think you do it in the England team and it works well. Then you go down and you do it in the counties. And I know we have PCA reps who are fantastic. They're very overstretched. They're also trying to deal with people trying to do, look at what career is next after cricket and all sorts of different things. And I think just having someone or two or three people who are kind of around the England team specifically to give them that space to talk about things that might be affecting them off the field, whether it be mental health, whether it be family issues, marriage issues, stuff they're afraid to talk about. This person is totally safe. I think that can be a really healthy move.
Yeah, because there's probably that feeling of judgment, isn't there? Even if it's a teammate. I think even if it's yes, you feel confident. There were certain teammates I felt so confident about. Yeah, you probably have this micro part of you that is thinking they're a part of the team. Like, I can't show that weakness. The ego kicks in. I don't want to show that element of it. And that neutral person would be super valuable. Look, I'm so cautious of time and I'm taking up your time. But I wanted to just talk about your book. So your first book, Back from the Edge. What can people look to expect from that?
It's pretty raw and honest. I mean, I didn't leave anything. I left everything on the floor, as they say. I just, I was able to write it kind of 7-8 years after it all happened, because I needed that time to gain perspective on what had happened. What had happened in my kind of downfall, I guess, and then rebuild and recovery, and so it's a really honest and look at all of that. Well, what my experience, my life, and also most importantly the lessons I learned from it. That's what I've really tried to do. The lessons of how I found a different way to live my life around control, what my definition of happiness was, and all these sorts of things to hopefully give people a bit of solution as well around these sorts of things, and just understand the psyche of professional sport, and then maybe some solutions as to how we move away from it. But it's really raw. It's my soul, and I hope people gain something from it when they read it.
Yeah, awesome. If it's been anything like some of the stuff we've been talking about here, I definitely recommend people. I'll leave a link in the show notes for that as well. And you were mentioning that before we started that you're writing or finished writing your second book.
Yeah, I have. I've written a book called The Life of the Sports Agent, the Middleman. It was actually originally the first, because I've been working as a sports agent since I stopped playing, which is nearly a decade now, and I got asked to write this book. Originally, that was to be the first book, and then I started writing it, and then I just felt like I had my story to tell, and I contacted the publisher and said, "Look, do you mind if I write a different book?" And they were like, "Okay, write the first chapter, send it to us." So I wrote the first chapter of what is the first chapter of Back from the Edge now, sent it to John, and he'd like text back, just keep writing. So I wrote that book, but the life of the sports agent was always there. So and I had started writing it, and then when lockdown came, I had so much time on my hands that I finished the book off, and so that's coming out in November, and that's just a look at what is involved with being a sports agent. It's kind of entertaining, it's some good stories. I think it's informative, it's opinionated. And I don't think there's always a lot out there for people to know what's involved with being a sports agent. There's quite a bit of mystery around it. So hopefully people enjoy it.
Well, that's going to be quite exciting, because you are right. There is some mystery around it. Again, I'll link to where's the best place for people to find you if people want to get in touch. Where can they find you?
Well, any form of social media, I'm on it all. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is all. I'm on them all. So I'd encourage anyone to say hi. Not a problem.
No problem. And again, I'll link in the show notes to that for sure. Look, Luke, I really appreciate your time. I think we've covered some amazing stuff there. So I do really appreciate your time.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No worries.